Welcome everybody to the Mylio Photos Coffee Break. I'm Angela Andrieux. I'm a product evangelist for Mylio Photos, which means I am here to help you be successful with the software. I do a lot of our documentation and education. And today I'm joined by a handful of people from the Mylio team, as well as Karen Millay. Did I say it right this time?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
And she's an interior photographer who has been published a number of places. Her work is absolutely beautiful, and she gets to go to some of the coolest places. But why we brought her in today, not only to show some of her work, originally was an Apple Aperture user. So for those of you who have been in the photography space for a long time, you might have heard of Apple Aperture or even been a user. And it was a great program that competed for a long time with Lightroom. And most photographers either went with Aperture or went with Lightroom. And unfortunately, a few years ago, Apple said, nope, we're not going to support this anymore. They wrapped in a bunch of features from Aperture into Apple Photos, but made it kind of a dumbed down version and made a lot of photographers very unhappy and left them hanging with, no way to keep their images organized and keep their workflows going. So they kept old computers and tried to keep their libraries active as long as possible. And it had gotten to a point for most of them for now, that's just no longer feasible. So one of the features we have in Mylio Photos is the ability to import Aperture libraries. And so JC, who's joined us today, he's our head of customer success. And he actually was the one who was instrumental in helping Karen get all of her Aperture, her professional libraries, migrated into Mylio Photos. So what I'd like to do today is talk with both of them and find out some of the lessons they learned during that process, some pitfalls that if you are going through the same thing that you can avoid, and how to make that transition as pleasant as possible. And then we'll take a look at some of Karen's beautiful work and get a little bit of inspiration. So welcome, Karen. Thank you for joining us, JC and Lori. I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you guys, and let's talk a bit about Aperture and why you left and where you are now with Mylio.
Sure. Well, I've been a photographer for about 20 years. So I went to all, the Aperture seminars. We're here for you. This is all going to work out. So I just fully jumped in and never, ever thought in my wildest imagination that, it's Apple, where they're only going to just expand and grow this program. So I had, in addition to shooting for magazines, architects, designers, and so forth, I also license images to Getty and Alamai and Offset, and then also art too. I have different third-party licensees that do wall art and et cetera. So there's just everything was in different, projects and albums, and it was my whole livelihood. And I mean, my husband can tell you it was a very emotional experience. I mean, I wasn't able to upgrade my operating system for like ever. And my contacts and my calendar program were starting to wig out, and it was just at that time, and I needed to do it. And I had photo assistants looking for different things for me, and I tried Lightroom. I'm like, that's not what I need at all. And I will never forget, it was one weekend day, and I'm just like, there's got to be something. There's got to be something. I was in the living room on my laptop, Googling different things, and there were JC's videos. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I think this is gonna work. And I told everyone in my life, like, oh my goodness, I think this is gonna work. And not only that, but JC, I sent an email out to you guys, and JC reached out to me personally and then held my hand throughout the entire process, along with my #1 photo assistant throughout the years, who knew how I operated, but also could liaise between the computer speak and me. And it has been a just complete success. And I felt so secure. I mean, you can tell I'm like emotional about it because it's like 90,000 images. And we did all the right things at all the right time. And it's so much better than it ever was. So that's my intro. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Good work, JC.
What was interesting about the whole experience, at least interesting for me, I know it was rather painful for Karen, was that the challenge really wasn't to get Mylio to recognize the Aperture library and import. The biggest challenge was to be able to keep Karen working on her current Aperture library while we were making the transition, and having an entire backup of her work in a different computer, because it wasn't just transitioning from Aperture to Mylio, it was also the learning curve of Karen has been using Aperture for a long time. She is quite the expert with the application. She knows how to find specific photos for specific clients for specific things. And she has a very large library. So it was two things. It was making the transition, which from a software standpoint and from the library standpoint, Mylio makes fairly easy. But from the hardware standpoint, because Aperture requires this very, very, very outdated operating system, you couldn't run Mylio current version on the same version as all Aperture. Now, that is not the issue that most people are going to have, because they're no longer using Aperture. They still have an Aperture library, and Aperture doesn't have to run in the computer that the library is stored in for Mylio to read that library and import it. You just point it to the file and Mylio reads it and see it. But in Karen's specific instance, the challenge was she needs to continue working while she's not just copying the library into Mylio, but learning how to use Mylio. And we figured it out. I like to think we did a good job of that. We even did it from the field, right, Karen, while you were doing on location shoots.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did it. And Brittany is my, she's not in the photo world now, but she was my liaison. And so there was a critical point when she's like, oh no, you're going to be using Mylio, for this last shoot. You're using, I'm like, but she's just, oh no, you're doing it. And it was just, and then once I did, it was like, oh my goodness, this is just a whole new world, and it's one I want to be in. So, but yeah, when it's when your photos, not only are they personal to you, all of our photos are personal to us, but also it pays my mortgage, so it's, and it could be a photo that I shot, honestly, 15 some years ago that I need to find because someone needs it for, in the back, there's a picture of the Louvre in Town and Country. I went there 10 years ago, and that picture was taken 10 years ago, and the magazine ran it this last year. So I needed to go back that far and find that, that process, high res file. So it's not like I could just, with Lightroom, I felt like, oh, everything's new, like everything's just new to this job, and then everything else I go, no, I need access to, that orange on the vine from 12 years ago. And Mylio lets you do that so seamlessly.
So are there any, JC, maybe this is the best question, best for you.
Yeah.
Anything that somebody who has those libraries on their computer, anything they need to do before they import those into Mylio?
Not really. I mean, what Mylio is going to do is going to do two things. It's going to actually, it's doing one thing. It just makes it look simple. What Mylio is going to do is it's going to read the database, the Aperture database, and is going to learn what the projects in your Aperture library is. And that's how Aperture libraries are organized. They're organized into projects. And within those projects, you can create a lot of different things, albums and other views. Mylio is going to treat every project in your Aperture library as a folder. So what happens is when you point Mylio to an Aperture library, it'll create a top-level folder in Mylio. And within that folder, there'll be subfolders for every one of your projects. And then however that project was organized in Aperture, that will appear in Mylio. I can actually show you what that looks like because, and I shared this with Karen, I also started my Mylio journey from an Aperture import. I used to be an Aperture user, and before I started working for Mylio, I met the founder of the company, and long story short, I was showing him some of my underwater photos and he's telling me about Mylio. And I'm like, oh, I could use that because my photos are like everywhere right now. I stopped using Aperture because I had to upgrade my computer. And so that's how I started. So let me share my screen really quick. And of course, my library is nowhere near as extensive as Karen's, but you'll notice that one of the top level folders in my Mylio library here, let me move some things out of the way, is a folder called From Aperture. And that's the folder I created and where I put everything when I was doing my initial Aperture import. And you'll see that within that folder, there's 258 subfolders. That represents the projects and the subfolders within those projects. So if I open this folder, you can see that I have a folder called Blake Island. That was a project in Aperture. There's kayaking 1 and 2. Everything that was a folder in my Aperture collection, it is now a folder in Mylio. And some of those projects have subfolders within them where you can see other organization within those folders. But as soon as those photos hit Mylio, Mylio not only keeps that folder project structure that you're accustomed to, so you can go and find things by project, which is now a folder. Of course, it's going to organize everything into all the other typical views of Mylio. So everything was viewed on a calendar. And Karen, you'll remember that that was one of the things that I was trying to teach you was like, you don't need to rely on the folder or the project structure anymore. You can just type something and Mylio will find it. If you remember when you did the photo shoot, you can go to that year, that month, that day. If you remember what keywords are associated with that project, Mylio will search and find those keywords again. So that is what we did. And yeah, and it's really simple. You just point Mylio to the Aperture library and voila.
Yeah, it's great. It really is. It's worked out so wonderfully. And yeah, I use the search and the filter more. In fact, Angela and I had a little session on that too. And I'm like, it's just practicing. And honestly, like Aperture's like so far back in my mind, like don't even think about it anymore. Thank goodness, I'm fully into Mylio. And honestly, I mean, whoever is listening and to the recording or whatever, I mean, this is it. Like there isn't anything else that works. And it's like Mylio had Karen in mind. I can't believe how personable the experience was and how it's worked so incredibly well.
So we have a couple of questions from Pamela in the chat. She'd like to know what the biggest changes to your workflow were once you switched from Aperture to Mylio.
Oh, that's a good one. I think the ease of exporting and importing jobs. And when I do a job, I send the selected images that the images the client orders in high res and then also low res for social media and so forth like that. And I can just do it right from the Dropbox, right to the Dropbox rather, from Mylio. And has we figured out how to put my name on the file too when it's exporting. So it's all like ready to go. And it's less steps. So it's really kind of a pleasure. And one thing that I know I want to learn more as far as my comfort level is just doing things more remotely. And it's like that magic that Mylio, I still don't understand it. I just, I don't think I should try, but I haven't really accessed my Mylio library very much, from the road. But it's so great to know that I can and for my phone and all that. So I'm kind of easing up on that part of it. But I'm looking forward to that. But I would also say the importing super easy too. And I love that oh my gosh, I forgot to take that light switch out. I can open it up in Photoshop from Mylio, make the change, and then it's all done. I don't have to like re-import it, change the file name so I know it's been done. It's another new one. It's all so seamless. It's like almost too easy.
And I know the question was asked to Karen and not to me, but for me, the biggest change in workflow from working Aperture to working in Mylio is that when I was using Aperture, I was limited by the size of my library. I have multiple Aperture libraries, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Just like people today might have multiple Lightroom catalogs and they can switch back and forth from one to another. That's something that I used to do with Aperture because I have multiple devices. So each device had a different library, and that has been a big change in workflow with Mylio, where I don't even travel with a laptop anymore. Most of my photography happens when I take a trip. The bulk of my library is my travel photography or my underwater photography. So I used to travel with a laptop, and whenever possible, it was the same laptop that I use Aperture in. That is no longer the case. I just take an iPad, I import directly to that iPad, and the photos make it home before I do. So that's a huge change. A lot of technology changes, of course, from the time Aperture was very prevalent to today. iPads were not really a thing back then, and the few iPads that we had didn't have a lot of memory. But the fact that we can do that today and that Mylio helps you with that workflow, is super powerful for my use.
So another question from Pamela: how long ago did you make the switch? And how long did it take before you were comfortable with Mylio?
Gosh, JC, how long was it? That's a really good question. I
want to say it was we started in the summer, right?
I think so. Yeah.
So last year?
Yeah, last year. And honestly, once I imported that first photo shoot, I was sold. It really was such an easy switch. I'm no joke. So I wouldn't be I mean, I was afraid to do it. I was. I'm stuck in my ways, and I want to, and I'm so.
I was very proud of you, Karen. I have to say.
Thank you. Oh my God. Well, because I had one library that had, almost 90,000 photos on it. I didn't realize, that was a big deal. I'm like, yeah, I have one library. I didn't know I was supposed to like divide them up, and it just, because all my pictures do, relate, all my flowers and trees and all that. It's some of the oldest ones are the most favorite. So, yeah. I'm just, so yeah, it was a very easy transition. I don't know. I mean, was Mylio made for Aperture users? Did you have us in mind?
No, that was not the case at all.
Really?
The reason our founder started Mylio is because he couldn't find a piece of software that he thought did everything he wanted to do. A big part of it was not looking at your photos only as a folder structure, only by project organization, but having that more holistic view of like, when did I take a photo, or where did I take a photo? And Aperture, very advanced for its time, it even had face recognition towards the end there.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a part of the UI that exposed that and made it easy to interact with the way Mylio does. So no, actually, we've had similar questions from previous Picasa users. They say, did you make Mylio to replace Picasa because Picasa was going away? And quite honestly, it was coincidental that both of those applications reached end of life right around the time Mylio was starting. So we did pick up quite a few users from both of them, and we still do to this day, because there's still people. I mean, Karen is the perfect example, that are using Aperture, I just transitioned an Aperture library for my eye doctor. So for the past few years, every time I go get my eyes checked, we have this conversation about how he can't access all his photos because they're in Aperture, and the computer that was running it no longer runs, and it's dead, and that he thinks his photos are gone forever. I'm like, I can help you with that. I can help you with that. So this past winter, this past November, he reached out to me and said, so my daughter, and just to put this in perspective and make it a little bit more personal, when you walk into my eye doctor's office, one of the things you see in one of the walls is a picture of his daughter taken on every birthday from the time she was born to today, and she's in her mid-20s now.
So cool.
So there's this amazing flow of her photos. And then all the other photos that he takes, because he's an avid photographer, are all over the walls. So this November, she asked him, as a Christmas present to her, she wanted him to recover his photo library, because she realized how important that library was to him. And it was kind of like a chunk of his life was missing.
Oh.
So he reached out to me and said, all right, if you're still up for it, I'm going to take you up on this. And again, the biggest challenge was the hardware, right? It was resurrecting his hardware enough that we could extract that Aperture library, put it on a separate hard drive, and then import it into Mylio. But that's exactly what we did. And I created a Mylio account for him. And I imported his photos into that Mylio account. And I called him up and I said, okay, so go to your computer, download Mylio. Okay, now log in with this credentials, the account that I created with his email address. And he logs in and he starts seeing all his photos, like from home, right? And he was just floored. I think I'm getting free glasses out of it. But,
I would hope so.
but it's another experience, and I should ask him if he wants to come talk with us sometime, because he was pretty excited. And then he's like, so how do I share this with my daughter now? I'm like, she just has to do exactly what you did. Have her install Mylio on her phone or on her laptop or whatever, and log into the same account. And he's like, and the photos are just going to show up? Yeah. So are they on the cloud? No. I don't understand. It's okay. You will. And sure enough, he gets it. And now he's like, okay, this works great. And it's great that my daughter's photos are not on the cloud, because I didn't want them on the cloud. That's why he liked Aperture in the first place. Yeah. And he was so reticent to try anything else. So
the cloud concept too is, everything I was looking for when I would Google and try to find other kinds of systems to replace Aperture, everything was cloud-based. And I was like, no, I don't want, these are mine. This is my livelihood. I do not want them on the cloud. I mean, I have offsite backup as well, but it's super secure and very photo industry driven. But yeah, I just don't want them on somebody's cloud. I want them here. I need the files. So I have a RAID, and we did that. But that was huge. I thought I'm gonna have to go. I didn't think there was an option, but there was.
Your story, along with JC, I'm sure resonates with a lot of people. I have a friend who is a wildlife photographer, and she does workshops in Africa. And most of her life she spends in Africa. And when Aperture was, cut off, she was devastated, didn't know what to do. So when she gets back to the States in a couple months, I'm going to show her Mylio, and she's going to be absolutely thrilled. So this is a great segment. I'll have her watch it as well, but she'll be really happy about it.
Yes, please give her so much encouragement, and this is exactly what she needs. Yeah,
it's great.
Very cool. Karen, you want to share your screen and give us a little bit of inspiration,
Yeah,
show us a little bit of what you do and what your library looks like now.
Okay. I'm not the biggest zoomer, so hopefully am I doing this right? You just tell me.
Yep, we can see your screen.
Oh, you can. Okay. All right. So there you are. Let me just I have Mylio ready to go. Voila.
Awesome.
Can you believe it? Oh, it's just so wonderful. So these are all these shoots took place with Mylio. I think, maybe around here, September or something was Aperture. I can't remember exactly what shoot it was that got, was the first one, but they're all there. And, we mentioned solving, there's all my, images, the details. This is one camera. I shoot with a Canon R5 if anyone's interested, and I use a 50mm for the detail shots, and then the larger like room shots. There's portraits, but then I use my 24-70, and there we go. And most of these result in stories. I can show you a couple of those, too, but yeah, it's wonderful. And I'm always changing, like, that's my husband there. I'm always changing the cover picture, because that's a fun thing to be able to do and see your things. This was a fun one in Bayhead, New Jersey, that is going to be in House Beautiful coming up. And sometimes there's pictures of me shooting, but mainly it's pictures that are going to run, in the magazine, architecture, design, lifestyle, that kind of thing. And what else can I tell you? I still use the albums. So, for instance, on a particular project, I will grab, like, I'm doing a dog book, actually, and so I will grab the dogs and then put them on the clipboard, and then I'll go over to albums and find my dogs and dogs at home. And then I'll, these are already in here. Oh, that was a question. If you paste them in again, they don't duplicate, right?
I don't believe so. JC, can you confirm that?
Yeah, that's correct. It won't put them there again.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I could paste it again, or maybe those were not in there, but yeah. So there's my dog. So I go back and forth between albums and folders, is just my main thing of what I do.
And by the way, I didn't mention this before, but the albums that were in Aperture do transfer to Mylio. So
Yeah.
those came over as well. It wasn't just a folder structure that got
Which
brought
was
over.
huge to me. I mean, early on, I had albums for actual shoots. Now each shoot gets its own project or folder now. But I way back, I just had, like, August imports, and then I put them in albums and so forth. So, but yeah, so those folder structures, here's, a lot of my stock, my offset and Getty, and those are all in albums, and flowers and trees and holiday and all that kind of stuff is in there. And then I don't know if people might want to kind of see, like, the result, like, that's a traditional home cover, and then here's the spread of the story. And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm doing. And yeah, the latest one.
Beautiful. Love your
Thank
work.
you.
I know. Isn't your work amazing?
Yeah, it
That's
is.
beautiful. This one went absolutely viral on Instagram. And she's got a project in Florida that she wants me to shoot next, so that should be fun. And then this is, and if you're in Los Angeles, this is the current one of the second to last issue. Is really beautiful. I'm so lucky because, you know, I get to take these pictures, but like the architect that creates, you know, the designer, it's really a joy. Always try to get a dog in whenever I can. So that's and I will say in Mylio, I only put my final TIFFs. So I don't put my raw files in there. You know, I take, like, for this particular shot, you know, I probably took 10 or 12 exposures, you know, to layer it all in together. And we did blocks for different glares and all that kind of stuff. And so I processed them all in Photoshop and then only put the final. I keep the others for safekeeping on a couple different hard drives, but I rarely, if ever, need to go back to them because I've got all the finals here. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
And for those of you who are wondering, I did put into the chat how to add your Aperture library. So a link to the manual on how to do that. And then also another article we have on what transfers over exactly and what to expect moving from Aperture to Mylio. I think there was another question here from Pamela. She was asking about how do you use folders, albums, etc., which I think you already answered. Are you big on keywording?
Yes, I can. I am more so now with Mylio because you guys make it so easy. I'm trying to find a project that might lend itself. Well,
you think it's easy now? Just wait.
Thank you. This one was a house in the San Juan Islands up by you, and it was a huge compound actually. But what I do is you'll see the keywords. I shoot way more than the shot list, and then the designer orders their images, and they always usually go over, and it's extra income for me, which is nice. So I put, you know, ordered, and then it's also in my favorites folder, that particular shot. It's actually a ping pong table that's also a dining table. And I go ahead and I leave, this is, the name on here is similar to is the same name as that's on my hard drive, and that I'm working off of on Photoshop. So I just import it all in there. So it lands in keywords. So if I need, you know, Party Barn, San Juan Islands, it's all in there. So I don't really need the word selects or the date, but I just kind of did it that way. But
Okay.
yeah, so I
Awesome.
do use keywords. Yeah, and then and Angela taught me how to use the filter here with the keywords. So it's, yeah, I kind of just like ease up on the learning curve here. But that is very helpful because they might say, oh my goodness, you put them on the Dropbox, but I forgot to get them. It's already taken it down. It's been 4 months, you know, so I just go back and I put in the keyword ordered, and then the ordered ones will pop up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then Ted was asking, how do you organize your raw files outside of Mylio? If you wouldn't mind sharing that.
So I just have a couple, I have 2 hard drives. They're exactly the same. And I throw all the raw files onto one and then the other one. And then I have one in a fire safe, and then another one that's a little more accessible that I work off of for Photoshop. And I will say, as I'm working on the photos, every night, you know, after I'm done, before I leave to leave the next morning or something, I do upload them to a offsite backup, just God forbid. And I also keep a small Pelican case with the chips with the
memory cards.
memory cards.
Yeah.
I keep them with me until the job is delivered, because you know, nothing's
makes
ever
sense.
I mean, it's your livelihood. So,
Yeah.
you know, multiple
Makes perfect
layers of
sense.
protection. It makes perfect sense. I'm going to guess you have at least 2 camera bodies when you go to a shoot. You're not going to show up with just one. I mean, you're going to have multiple layers
I
of
have
everything.
2 exact setups with the exact same tripod, camera, and I have 2 24-70s. So, yeah. So it's just, you know, it's funny because, I work with stylists and editors and so forth, and the photographer does get paid the most, and I'm thinking like, well, I didn't decorate it and I didn't add these flowers that absolutely make this absolutely perfect for this shot, but I'm the one that if something goes wrong, so I think it does make sense because you're the one that has to actually deliver the goods. And yeah.
Makes sense. So Ted was wanting to clarify, how exactly are they organized? So when you have your raw files on that drive, are they organized by year, month, date, kind of, do you just throw them all in a file?
Yes, I would have just grabbed it for you, but I took it out the other day because I just finished. But basically, it is, well, like, actually, let me just show you the one that I did. Well, it'll have this same name and then it'll be underscore 2023 and then underscore the month.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
And
makes
it's a
sense.
folder with the, camera raw files in there. And then I also put, all these selects, all these finals are on there as well. Why not? Just throw them on, Drives are
Multiple
cheap.
layers.
Yeah.
That's what we always tell our users, storage is incredibly cheap. I just got a tiny 2 terabyte SSD drive for $120. 2 terabytes SSD. And it's like smaller than my hand.
Yeah. They're amazing.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if you need bigger drives, you can get, an HDD, regular traditional hard drive, up to like, I think 18 terabytes for under $500 these days. So, I mean, storage has come down in price so much. It's, better to have duplicates, repetition of your backups, because hard drives do fail. I mean, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So having that backup is super important. And there are not a million, but a bunch of different ways you can do it. Multiple Mylio vaults are one way. Using a separate server for your RAWs and keeping all of your pics in Mylio and letting Mylio handle those. And then having an offsite backup solution. There's a lot of ways to get it done, but you just want to make sure you have things in a few different places, because if one fails or gets lost or stolen, you have another one to fall back on and you don't lose any of those precious memories.
Something that Karen probably doesn't know yet is that Mylio now supports cloud storage to services like Backblaze and Wasabi. So
Cool.
Yep.
we should talk.
Yeah, that's exactly. No, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
that really is. And one thing too, I wanted to say to the, Aperture users that are going to switch over to Mylio is that just know that you're never going to have to go through this again. Because JC, told me like these photos are yours. It's your file structure. You're never going to have to go through this again, the way Mylio set up, right, JC?
correct. I mean, we go through extreme lengths to make sure that all of your data is preserved in the file system where it can be accessed outside of Mylio. It is not inside a proprietary library that some other engineering company would have to reverse engineer to get to your content again, which is what was happening with Aperture and what we had to do to be able to display all of your collections. Mylio's folder structure is completely visible in the file system of whatever computer you're using, whether it's Windows or Macintosh. And the metadata changes that you make are on sidecar files right next to the photo file. So it can all be accessed outside of Mylio. So if Mylio were not to be around for whatever reason, which I hope it doesn't happen because I'm planning to retire from this company.
Yes.
You can still have access to your photos. Your folder structure would be preserved, and you can just use another application to import all that and preserve that folder structure. And that we're very, very unique in that we do that, and it's one of our main core values that we will preserve the folder structure, and that all data is owned by the user, not by us. So we are not in the data business. We are in the photo organization business.
Yep.
That's really key too, because for me, in our will, my my niece who's involved in advertising and graphic design, she gets my photo library. I don't know if she really wants it, but and who knows, down the line, what it's just so good to know that they're not going to get stuck somewhere. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of those experiences. I think that anybody who listens to this, is listening live or catches the recording, is going to find this extremely valuable if you've used Aperture in the past. So really appreciate your time, Karen, and for showing us some of your lovely pictures. Those are always great. I love when we get to Zoom and I get to peek into your galleries and see all those fabulous pictures. Thank you, JC, for also joining us and giving us your insight. Always welcome and valuable. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to message us in the community. We'll be around and can answer those for you. JC hangs out there. I hang out there. Karen's there. So let us know if you have any questions. And otherwise, we will catch you at the next coffee break.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
So much.
Bye. Good to see you, Karen.
You too, JC. Bye.
Bye.